Each student's rate of change is compared to other students with a similar test score history. The beauty of the SGP is that it compares like to like, apple to apple, academic peer to academic peer. This means that what a student needs to do during the course of the academic year is to keep up or surpass the growth of his or her academic peers with whom they have been grouped. In addition to using assessment results to establish academic peer groups, Renn Learning's SGP calculation takes several other factors into consideration, including subject, grade, date range of test administration, and year. In doing so, the SGP minimizes or eliminates advantages or disadvantages of testing early or testing late. A student must take at least 2-star assessments in order for Renn Learning to pinpoint the student's peer group and his or her performance relative to this peer group. For the vast majority of our students, their academic peer group and SGP will be determined using their spring 2015 STAR score and their fall 2015 STAR score. For second grade students and a handful of other students across the district without spring 2015 data, the fall test will determine their percentile rank and scale score. Their academic peer group and their SGP will be solidified after the winter test. The SGP in the spring will show the amount of growth each student made relative to their academic peer group across the nation. The SGP is reported out on a scale of 1 to 99, with lower numbers representing lower relative growth and high numbers representing higher relative growth. Typical growth would be an SGP of 50. For the 2015-16 school year, Brandywine is again establishing a baseline SGPA of 50, typical growth, and upon Renn Learning's advice, establishing a ceiling of 65. This means the range for satisfactory is from 50 to 65. Placing a ceiling of 65 on satisfactory eliminates the possibility of setting unattainable targets during our first year using the SGP. In all cases, the SGP is considered a fall to spring growth measure. Let's walk through an example. Meet Juanita. She's a 7th grader with a fall STAR math scale score of 651. In the spring, Juanita's STAR math score was 741. That's an increase of 90 scale score points over the course of the school year. 90 scale score points. That's great, isn't it? That's a great question. How do we decide if Juanita's 90 scale score points is good growth, bad, or average? This isn't an easy question to answer because students at different performance levels in different grades grow at different rates. For example, a high-achieving 3rd grader grows at a different rate than a low-achieving 3rd grader. A high-achieving 3rd grader grows at a different rate than a high-achieving 2nd grader. The answer? Compare Juanita's growth to that of her academic peers. Juanita's academic peers are students at the same grade level with the same starting scale score. Data from millions of STAR tests given every year is used to calculate growth norms. In this case, we're going to look at students who scored like Juanita, a 651 scale score in the fall. Then we're going to look at how these students scored in the spring. Juanita's spring scale score was a 741. Some of Juanita's academic peers scored higher in the spring, meaning they showed more growth than Juanita. Some of Juanita's academic peers scored lower. They showed less growth than Juanita. After looking at all the data, Juanita grew more than 65% of the students who started like her. That means her SGP is 65. Had Juanita's score been a 50, her growth would be considered typical, with half of her academic peers performing better and the other half not as well. It's important to remember that SGPs are a measure of fall to spring growth. The use of STAR for RTI progress monitoring will not affect the academic peer group placement. Each student's spring SGP will show the student's growth relative to his or her academic peer group that they were placed in the fall. Yes, SGPs can be used to determine the relative growth of a group of students, like a class, a whole grade level, a school, even a district. Let's take a look at how. Think back for a moment on what you know about measures of central tendency. Hopefully, the 3 M's are coming to mind: mean, median, and mode. Let's take a quick look at each and see why one is the preferred method of determining the performance of a group of students. Mode: identifying which value occurs most often in a given set of numbers. Pretty obvious that going with the most frequent score is anything but fair to teachers. Then there's the mean. The mean, or average, is frequently used as the default measure. But when you have extreme outliers, the effect can be devastating and distort the group's performance. In this case, the scores of the 2 and 11 significantly impact the average of the group. Because of unintended consequences of outliers, Ren Learning prefers, recommends, and reports out the median. How does the same data play out using the median? The data set above is the same. The only difference is that the data has been rank ordered from the lowest to the highest. Overall, there's a total of 13 scores in the list. The median, or middle data point, would have 6 scores that are lower, 6 that are higher, and the median would be right in the middle. In this case, the median is 58, a much fairer description of the growth of the class. Let's flash back to our proficiency model with Teacher A and Teacher B. Their student scores haven't changed, but let's take a look at how well the students in each class did compared to their academic peer group using the SGP. Teacher A's class median SGP was 42 and indicates that the relative growth of the group was less than typical, as indicated by an SGP lower than 50. On the other hand, Teacher B's class far surpassed the growth of their academic peers with a median SGP of 67. Brandywine's expectation of an SGP of 50 to 65 for satisfactory would render Teacher A as unsatisfactory and Teacher B as exceeds for component 5. So let's just recap some very important points to remember about STAR's SGP. It's a measure of relative growth that compares a student to his or her academic peers. It's a fall to spring growth measure. The winter administration updates how well that student is doing compared to his or her academic group that they started with in the fall. It uses the median to indicate the relative growth of the class. Typical growth is considered an SPG of 50, and for component 5 purposes, an SGP between 50 and 65 is satisfactory. Anything past 65